Hello, welcome to the Dr. Kirsten Show. I'm your host, Dr. Kirsten Lauritsen, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about how I tend to see the lens of health. I've had a couple of conversations, just really interesting conversations over the last couple days, even. And I thought, and I also saw this post that I want to talk about, and I thought this would be a really good one to do as sort of like a long form post. So in the form of a podcast. So here we are. Specifically, what I want to talk about is I saw by somebody that I follow. I actually don't know how to pronounce her name, but Peta Kelly, I think is her full name, and her Instagram is Peta Jean with an underscore. And I love getting to follow her. She's so amazing in the way that she speaks and writes, and I love what she, puts out there. And one of a post that she wrote, it really inspired this podcast as she goes, I don't know when wellness went from eating well, working out, and sunshine and community to being afraid of touching receipts. And I thought that was so good because I know exactly what she means. And I do think that on the health journey, we tend to go through various phases. And I see this a lot. And I can say this from personal experience because especially being someone who had endometriosis and migraines, I've been through that journey, right? Of like cutting out all of the inflammatory foods and making sure that my water is filtered and, I'm not drinking out of plastic and that, we don't have too many plastic things and changing all the Tupperware and making sure that all of my cosmetics and our cleaning supplies in our house are all very clean, and trying to reduce toxins as much as possible and air filters. And then, yeah, like not touching receipts. I've been down that road and I've been down that road for a very, very long time. And what I find very fascinating about the whole thing is that as I was sort of reflecting on this and I was thinking like about what even she was talking about there is I started realizing like the narrative that was starting to happen in my brain and I thought, you know what? This is good. This is good for a podcast episode. So I hope that in this episode, if there's something that you need to hear, that you hear it, and that it is helpful for anyone on this health journey. And I think that with so much of the information that's out there, this is how people can get very burned out and overwhelmed on the health journey. And so hopefully this will help to like relieve some of that and give you some clarity as well. So, kind of on that journey, right? Like, I think people do tend to start on the elimination pathway, which isn't, I don't think, necessarily a bad thing because there actually are a lot of things that we can get exposed to. And depending on how aware we are, the choices that we make can actually really impact how much is coming into our system. So, just even from the basics of looking at just like do I think that this is wrong? Yes, I do think that all food should not have chemicals and toxins on them, and that we shouldn't have to pay more for organic food. I think that's really something that is just not okay, but it is a reality that is our current reality. And so, getting exposed to things like glyphosate and these other kinds of toxins that end up on our food, this isn't just showing up in produce, right? It's also showing up in things that are in processed foods and things like that as well. So making choices that allow us to reduce our exposure in certain ways is important. And it is something that is kind of one of those first line steps of like, okay, in process, how do we start removing some of those things? Sometimes what I get is that these things are not very affordable, which I totally understand. And so, what I will oftentimes suggest or advise is just doing your best to find what you can, maybe structuring your budget and finding, certain areas where you can save and other areas where you can let some stuff go so that you could maybe spend a little bit more on some fresher, like more organic produce. Those kinds of things, shifting around in those ways. And then what I also sometimes suggest as well is sometimes there's like community gardens that people have access to. And then also, even if you're on like an apartment building, you can still do a lot of like gardening in pots. And I've seen many people have lots of lettuce and tomatoes and like fresh veggies like that just from on a teensy tiny little porch, little tiny patio. I've seen them do that. And I've also seen people be able to learn how to grow food inside with like a grow light and a tower and all those kinds of things. Again, are some of those pretty expensive? Yes, but there also is opportunity to be able to build some things on your own as well. So, look, I know that accessibility here, we can have a whole conversation around it, but I do think that it is really important. It's something that even when like we didn't have a whole lot of money, I still prioritized making sure that we were eating really, really good food. And it did mean that we didn't get to do other things. But when you have gone through a chronic health condition, you start to realize how important nutrition is and the things that go in your body and on your body. They are very, very important. So this kind of feeds into that comment, right? Of like, nutrition, yes, super important. Sunshine, yes, so important. Community, so important. I think we learned that really, really well in 2020. Like what a lesson that was of the way that people were isolated and the amount of like health conditions and mental and emotional things that came from that. Like I will never forget how people came into my chiropractic clinic and they stayed for forever talking to me and I thought it was so interesting, but people were literally craving connection during that time. And it is a very, very important part of healing. So, I think that that's one thing that coming out of that really just terrible time, we really did get to see what things are very, very important for people. And when we're talking about physical health, we're also looking at your mental and emotional health as well. And so community is one of those things that is really, really important. And so then, also thinking about when did it then become about all of these like toxins and what you're touching and receipts and things like that. I thought it was really interesting because I was like, okay, well, yes, it is true that there is a lot of bisphenol A, BPA on receipts. And if you also are putting like hand sanitizer on your hands and then touching receipts all day, it amplifies the amount of that comes into your skin. And I try not to touch receipts very much. I am one of those kinds of people. I also try to reduce the amount of toxins that we clean our home with. I try to reduce the amount of toxins that are on our skin. So skin products and hair stuff. I mean, we make our own soap. Like I am that person. Okay. I am that person. And it is a knee-jerk reaction, I think, in a sense, when you've had some kind of condition on either side, whether it's hormone imbalances, whether it's like low testosterone, or whether it's like imbalances in estrogen, progesterone, on the female side, like whatever it is, those hormones being balanced has a lot of impact on the physical body. So being someone who has had endometriosis, I tend to err a little bit on the cautious side when it comes to the things that are coming into our body. The cookware that we have is obviously trying to reduce the amount of toxins that come through that. Teflon being one of the ones that you want to be really, really careful with. So, as well as like air fryers and all that kind of stuff because they can release heavy metals. So it's interesting. It's just created just a very interesting thought process in my head, and I want to take this a step further because what I've also realized is as I have healed on the mental, emotional, and like what I would call the energetic or spiritual side, the other like physical body things haven't become like as necessary. I think that's a really good word for it because I do think they're still important, but they haven't become as necessary. And that has been a huge revelation for me. I think that part of the burnout piece that we have is that we feel like we have to control so much of the external environment to barely hold it all together inside. It's literally this like rigidity and this control and this gripping that we try to create to just barely get by in keeping our health together. Because if you're like me, in the past, I used to believe that I had to do all of those things and I had to do them right and I had to do them perfectly in order to stay in any sort of form somewhat healthy. And that is a very, very hard place to be. And it absolutely 1000% leads to burnout in the health world, not just like burnout in your career, but like burnout in like the amount of things that you have to do in order to like keep symptoms at bay. Um, and in some ways, I do feel like some of those things do become a natural thing. Like they just start to become a part of your identity. Like you don't eat sugar all the time. You don't eat fast food all the time. You do the things that are kind of like a return to like what are important. Mentioned in the original post, the one that was described, right? Is like nutrition is really important. So is community. So is sunshine. Like these things are very important. But we've also gotten a little bit lost in the amount of like, what do I really need to be careful of as far as like what you're getting exposed to? So, but I also think that if we don't pay attention to those things, that it can get out of control, right? Like if you look at the amount of toxins that women are exposed to in like the average woman before 8 a.m. is exposed to like over 100 different chemicals before she leaves the door. And on average, for men, that was 8 chemicals total. Okay. So this is really important when we start thinking about how much is actually going into our system. And so I'm not going to stand here and say that that's not important because like especially with my functional medicine background, like those things are important and chipping away at them one like little by little as you can, like as you finish up certain products, like trying to opt for less ingredients, ones that are safer, ones that don't have fragrance and these potentially very powerful and potent endocrine disruptors. So they cause hormone imbalances. Those things are really, really important. And I've also noticed that as my body and my like mental and emotional and like spiritual like woo spaces, or you could call them, it could also be, religious, God, spiritual bodies, like those, like that, as that has healed and as I have created more of a relationship with those other, like we have the four bodies of like the physical, mental, emotional, and like spiritual or energetic, like those four bodies when they are all online, I guess you could say, or like when you're operating and working with the four and you see them that way, I would say that a lot of the other stuff that we tend to be super concerned about and very rigid and controlling over, like we don't have to worry so much about it. Like I no longer have to keep gluten out. I no longer have to keep dairy out. I have allowed those foods to come back in and I am still symptom free. Particularly on the endometriosis, sometimes migraines come in periodically, but they have their own lessons. But the endometriosis, I would say, is a big one because everyone told me that I could not heal endometriosis and that it would always be something that I had. And I will never forget the day when I realized like I haven't had painful periods in several months, and now they surprise me when they start. Like I don't know they're coming. And that is, I mean, I do because I track them, but like I'm not always that on point on those. And so they surprise me now, and they used to come with like a lot of pain, right? So I would know like like it's on its way. Um, I hope that that brings hope to somebody out there who is like dealing with endometriosis or PCOS or some kind of like thyroid hormone imbalance of some kind, because it is possible to heal autoimmune disease. These things are possible to heal. I love telling the story that of like one of my coaches who had really, really, really bad like celiac disease and is now able to eat gluten. Like this stuff is wild. And that didn't necessarily all come from like the functional medicine side of things with like supplements and nutrition and all that. Yes, are those things important and movement and all that? Yes. But healing the deeper layers of where those things come from. Like you guys know that, especially if you've seen this, if you've watched my videos or listened to my podcast for a while, like you know that we talk a lot about the like journey, the health journey in and of itself and why we end up with health conditions. And many times where those things tend to come from is from think stresses, traumas, things that happen in our past when from childhood that then end up becoming an external expression of the subconscious mind, the internal space, the internal representation ends up in the external. And that is literally what health symptoms are. They are a way of your body communicating with you that it needs something and that maybe there's something wrong and also where you need to start focusing. But what do? We tend to get really, really busy and we try to ignore. We try not to be still. We try not to sit in silence. We try to just busy ourselves till the cows come home, right? Like we're just constantly busy, 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 busy. And when you're constantly moving, constantly busy, and you never give yourself space to sit in silence and like work on those things, they will not only represent themselves in the body spaces where they got stored, but they will also continue to get louder and louder and louder until they force you to stop. And we want to get it before that happens. Now, if that happens, hope is not lost. We can still heal. I know because I've been there. But it's when we start really looking at those deeper layers, which is where the other stuff where we are trying to control so hard for every single piece of our environment, it becomes less important. It becomes less necessary. This is what I'm talking about here is like processing and releasing emotions from the body, restoring energy. If you follow like chakras, the flow of energy through your body is really important, and we can get very stagnant in those areas. And so when that energy can't flow, it gets stopped up. So for some people, it might be at the heart. And for some people, it might be at the throat, thyroid, right? It might be at the like solar plexus, which has a lot to do with your digestion. Gallbladder, anger, resentment. So all of these can have a tendency to have a like a blockage in the flow. And what's really, really interesting is when you start putting all the pieces together with like my like chiropractic piece as well, like you can feel sometimes in the back where there's like a lot of tension. I've been very like in the past, I've been very tight and very immobile around the like T12 junction where your upper like thoracic spine meets your lumbar lower back. And there is a junction there that really needs to move and is really important, and it will affect everywhere else, especially in your upper body because it needs to be able to rotate as you walk. And tension there can be associated with the adrenals, which are very important for the stress hormone and cortisol, but also for the production of sex hormones. And and they are also related to both either like the solar plexus or the root chakra. So what's so fascinating about all of it is how connected it all is, and you need to have the flow of energy through the whole system. So, and sometimes we think about like back pain and tension and tightness is like I've got to go to the chiropractor and I've got to have them, work this out, or I need to go stretch, or I need to go do those things. But also, what might be happening is it may actually be a physical representation of a symptom and a blockage which you need to sit with. This can be so challenging for people because when you sit there and say, okay, I'm just going to tune into the space, like what does it have for me? It also might mean that you have to face some stuff that you don't really want to face. And that's where I find having guidance and having support can be really helpful because if you've never done that before, it might take you to some places where you really don't want to go. And so having someone be able to hold that space for you is really important. But I mention all of this because when we talk about then like about beliefs and when we talk about emotions, each organ is associated with different emotions. So things like the gallbladder and the liver tend to be very hot when there's like anger or resentment or frustration. Whereas like the what's another one? Like the small intestine can tend to be more associated with feeling lost or vulnerable, or the bladder or the kidneys can be a little bit more of like a paralyzed will or fear. And not that they all relate on those same things. Like sometimes there can be all sorts of things stored in different areas. The stomach being very kind of like fear and nervousness. We get nauseous, right, when we get really nervous, sometimes. So yeah, it's not that it's a strict thing. Like fear can show up anywhere in our body and we can like feel tightness in our chest, right? So it's not to say that there's specific things in each one, but many of like especially according to like acupuncture and the meridians, there are certain organs that associate strongly with different emotions. So if you were going through your childhood and you experienced something like a very big emotion, or something happened that you didn't know how to interpret, or you didn't know how to figure out what happened, you didn't have a way to say, oh, logically, this is what's happening here. It's okay. Um, if you didn't have someone help you be able to sort through that, and if something traumatic happens, your brain is going to do what it needs to do in order to survive. So, what it does is it says, okay, well, we're going to store this emotion because we don't have a way to process it out of the body. And then we're going to create a belief so that we can figure out how to move forward here with some kind of model for the way that this world works. So when we do that, then that belief is like stored like a folder, like a cabinet file folder, right? And then what the brain does is it collects a lot of information to basically say, like, that is truth. So if I, let's say, create a belief that I am not worthy or I am not enough, then what the brain, the subconscious mind is going to do is it's going to collect more data and more information and put a filter on the things that come in from in the external world that reinforce that I am not worthy and I am not enough. This is where you might find yourself wanting to or needing to prove things, or that you need to do everything right. You need to be perfect in order to receive love, or any of those things. Those are really big and deep layers and beliefs that are very, very important. And all of these can create different blockages. They can be associated with blocked emotions, and then they start to show up in our external world. So, in the physical body, they start to show up. So, what I mean by all of this and why I think this is so important is because what we have a tendency to do is try to control the external environment when a lot of what's happening in the external environment is actually a representation of what's happening in the inside. It is a projection. And when we are projecting out into the environment through the filters of is going on, what we learned in the subconscious mind, then we get more of whatever that is until we learn how to shift those filters. And once you learn how to shift those filters, then the internal environment starts creating something new in the external. So instead of us feeling like we have to control for all of these things around us, we actually, all we really need to do is sit back and say, hey, what is here for me to learn? What do I need to shift in my internal space that will then allow for the external to align with what I want? I see this time and time again, and it shows up in my life all of the time. I see it with my clients. It's really one of the coolest things because it's almost like if you've ever had like a conversation that like over and over and over again with a partner or a friend that like it just seems like they don't understand you, they don't hear what you're saying, and no matter how many times you have it, it's like you end up in the same spot over and over and over again, both of you like frustrated or just like it's just not moving anywhere. When you shift what's happening on your side, like where it is that maybe you don't feel heard or you feel seen, or we release that negative emotion and we just let those, we literally help your body get it out of your body and put those chains down. When you're able to release that, then you go back to that conversation and it's like literally magic. It's like the entire conversation just flows and they see it, they get it, it just magically shifts. Behaviors change. It's like all you did was work on the piece that you were bringing to the table, and everything changes in the best of ways, right? Because now you're creating the thing that you said you want, which is in alignment with where you want to go. It's a really, really, really cool thing that happens. And I think that, especially when it comes to like burnout and health journeys, it's a very important point to have because it's so common that we start to look internally in the sense of like, there's something wrong with me, there's something broken, there's something here I need to overcome, there's something here I need to fix. And there isn't anything here that you need to fix. What's here for you is what you need to do to listen. What do you need to start listening to what your body is trying to tell you so that then you can take action and do those things that bring you into alignment? It's a softening, right? It's a softening. It's finding and creating an internal peace. Like how often do we try and like we're told you need to, be less busy. You need to remove things from your schedule. You need to do less. You need to rest more. You need to spend more time in the sunshine. You need to work less, right? So, like, people do that. They start doing all of it. They start taking things off of their schedule. They start shifting their schedules. And sometimes it gets filled with more stuff, right? Yeah, it's your subconscious mind doing that because it doesn't feel safe to actually rest. It's okay. But also, like we start trying to manipulate the external. We hire out help, right? We get help, we get people to help us with the carpools, like we do all of these things, but the internal space doesn't feel safe to rest. It doesn't feel safe to have empty space. It doesn't feel safe to actually be calm. So as we're trying to control the chaos externally, the internal space is literally chaotic with our emotions and all the things that we're trying to like bury and not face. And or maybe you're someone that does feel a lot of emotions all the time, and so it's very chaotic internally. Either way, uh, what the goal here really is to learn how to create a space that's almost like an internal retreat. That's my favorite word. If I could create like a physical, tangible, like visual almost of what an internal retreat looks like, for me, I picture like you're walking into a woods that's like you've got like a really pretty river that's like running through the space. Maybe there's like a really cozy bridge. There's so you hear that, you hear the birds, you hear the wind in the trees, right? You kind of get all of the senses. You get some sun, you get some wind, you get the water, you get the trees and the earth and the birds, like, right? So you get all of this like space and it just feels like you can breathe. That's what I sort of visualize as like it's this space that you can come back to and it's just calm. It's regulated. It's cozy. It's just a really nice space to be in. So even when there's like struggles and chaos and things that are hard things that are happening externally, there's also always a place where you can retreat to find calm and to find rest and to find peace. And I think what makes health things really hard is when your internal space doesn't feel like a retreat. When there's pain and fatigue and like body parts aren't moving and functioning like they should, it can be very hard to feel like that inner place is a retreat because you've probably spent if you're like me, you probably spent a lot of time trying to get out of your body. Like dissociation is very, very common with endometriosis, as well as many other like chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic symptoms, because your body isn't safe. You want to get out of your body. So, and this can oftentimes, I'll go even a layer deeper. A lot of these can come from trauma. They can come from rejection wounds. They can come from, yeah, like those are some of the big spaces where a lot of those can come from. Losing boundaries. So if you just constantly have let other people's needs matter more than your own, and you don't have any sort of boundary between what's the external and the internal, those are the things that have to be healed and then they have to be learned, right? We have to set up those boundaries. Those are some of the aligned actions that we need to take. But what I always say is that the actions are important, but what's more important that precedes the action is the healing, right? So it's looking at those deeper layers, at the emotions, the subconscious, the beliefs, the thoughts, the even the deep like energetic wounds, right? Those things are like really, really, really important. Not feeling loved, not feeling important, not being worthy, not feeling like you're enough, not feeling connected or that you belong, right? So that's that rejection wound. Those are all really, really important, big, big themes that I feel like need to be that I know I've witnessed, I experience this, I see it on a day-to-day basis. Like these things need to be healed. And then the action sort of just follows it from there. And so that's where I feel like I'll talk about this a little bit further and then I'll wrap up. But like one of the things that's been coming up for me a lot is that like I did the functional medicine round of things for so long, right? Like I did the paleo challenges, the removing inflammatory foods. As I mentioned, right? I've done all of the like removing toxins from your home. I've done taken so many supplements, the gut protocols. I've done so many functional labs, like the NutraVals and the GI map and GI effects, like looking at the gut. I've done like looking at your mitochondria and creating health in those senses and looking at hormones through like the Dutch panel and your hair tissue mineral analysis stuff. Like I've done all of those, and I would say that all of them really matter in their own right. Like I think, and I also look at blood panels as well, and I think that all of those give us a lot of really great data. But for me, they didn't get me to full resolution of my symptoms, and it just got really hard to like keep up with all of this stuff. And I just see it back now as just me trying to control. Like I was doing what I thought I needed to do. I was just doing it one step at a time, following the steps of where I was being led. But then I also sort of swung a little bit to like the NLP side, which is just really where we're looking at the subconscious, looking at the beliefs, looking at this like energetic and emotional healing, and like looking at the like how the brain is basically telling your hippocampus what to do. And then the hippocampus in your brain basically said, or sorry, the hypothalamus in your brain basically says, okay, here's the blueprint. And so then it just creates, right side. Sorry, I meant the hypothalamus. And then it creates the blueprint. And that's what shows up in your physical body. Every single cell feels all of your neurotransmitters, your thyroid hormone, like every single cell needs thyroid hormone, like, and all of those things are somewhat controlled by the hypothalamus. And your hypothalamus is responding to stressors. It's responding to your brain and your mind, your subconscious mind, and how it is interpreting literally everything that is coming in to your brain. Okay. So like literally all of this stuff is connected. And I've been there and I've been down that road. But I think that where it's been interesting is like where do the two meet? That's where I wanted to go with this, was like where do the two meet? And what I am starting to really this will probably shift in the next couple of years as I learn more and gather more tools. And like recently I've been a little more into like yoga, and not necessarily in the westernized like yoga that's for like a workout, but more of like yoga as a way to heal and to connect more with the body and to heal the energy spaces. Like I feel like there is a connection and a path and a flow, and part of me sort of feels like it's looking a little bit more like what I would do if I were back at the point where I had, endometriosis and I was trying to figure out what to do. I would start with the subconscious mind and start with that healing. And the reason why I say that is because what I have just really been seeing is that we can lose a lot of time and a lot of effort in doing a lot of things and in trying to force a lot of things because we want it to happen faster, right? Because we want to get where we want to go as quickly as possible. We want to get out of pain. We want to get out of the struggle. And so we have a tendency to like collect doctors, programs, supplements. I'll try this. I'll try this. I'll try this. I'll try this. The one place where healing needs to happen is internally. The one place where it needs to happen is internally. And you have all of those answers and those solutions, all of them. So that's where I would start with that. And then I would start with chipping away at the like, this seems like a good time now to run like a GI panel and let's see what's going on. And then because of that, we'll then do the physical things that align with that. That's where I think it's instead of pulling all of the labs and doing all of these things and taking all the supplements and making all the nutrition changes and all of the lifestyle stuff that can feel very overwhelming, instead starting with, okay, let's start paying attention and listening to what is your body asking for right now. And then let's take intentional and aligned action on those steps and allow your body to be the guide. Does this now feel like a good time to take a specific lab? Yes. Okay. Now let's do that. And then let's take aligned action based on these things. In that sense, it becomes a journey and it becomes a self-guided journey, one that is not based on what I think is most important for you. It is one that is based on what you need. And it is super specific for you. Can you see how different that is? Instead of me saying, oh, you have these symptoms. Well, let's name it. We'll call it this diagnosis. Now you have your identity wrapped up in this diagnosis and these symptoms. So that means you're always going to feel this way. And because of this, we're going to put you on this medication and you're just going to have to take this medication all the time. And it's very like, doom, doom, doom. That's it. But that doesn't leave a lot of, I mean, it basically just says, um, here's what's happening, here's what we do about it, and you're on your way. But it doesn't allow for any of the like healing and looking deeper into like why this is actually happening. Why is it happening to you? Why is it happening at this time? Right? Like those questions are really important. But I think what I know say I'll say this to you, and this is the last thing I'll say, I think, on this is it's that um in some ways it's cheaper, it's less expensive, and it's less effort to be told these are your symptoms, here's the name, take a medication, your insurance will cover it, and that's it. It takes less buy-in. It takes, yeah, it takes less effort. But also, in that sense, you end up in a big struggle all the time because you don't feel well. Even with taking the medication, whether you're aware of it or not, like the normal that you have might not actually be normal. It's just your normal. And that's where I think people sometimes get stuck is that they're like, "Well, I feel fine." Like, okay. Well, do you have migraines or do you have headaches? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's actually not normal. You should be able to actually feel like you have a clear mind every day. Um, do you struggle with digestive discomfort? Yeah, like all the time. I get constipated or I constantly have like loose stools. Okay. Well, that's not normal, right? So, yeah, I think and I think the piece here and the people that I attract tend to not be this kind of person, but I know that you are someone who cares and you're probably someone who's been pretty dedicated and tried a lot of things and you're probably someone who also has been at this for a really long time like I was. I was working on finding things since I was 18. My journey really started in healing endometriosis, right? Um, and it takes time. It's a journey and it's taking each step. But I think that we can condense that time quite a bit when we are actually learning and listening to what your body wants, right? My path and my journey took as long as it did because I was meant to see each piece the way that I see it now. And had I gotten all of this piece, this like the subconscious mind, those kinds of pieces, had I gotten that first, there wouldn't have been a need for the functional medicine side. Do you see what I mean? There wouldn't be a need for the amount of work that I did to learn those pieces. And they are important. So, in that sense, like I do think that it is really important that we take aligned action, that we aren't so afraid of all of the things that are bad for us and that create toxins and that are like, really, potentially bad for us. Because there are a lot of things. There's a lot of toxins that we get exposed to, and there's a lot of things that are out of our control. We can't control them. And to be living in fear all of the time of the things that we might be taking in, like, is our well, I would say if your coffee is moldy, like you should probably find a better quality coffee, and can you filter your water? That would be great, So there's things that are really important, and I'm not going to say that they aren't. But I also think too that like living in fear that like everything is going to kill you is also, or like make you sick. Um, if that's you, like that's one place where you need to start is unraveling that identity that you have to do everything perfect in order to stay somewhat held together and that you're not going to have symptoms or that you're going to be healthy. Or if you have a fear that if you don't do all of those things, then your symptoms are going to come back, it's another place that needs to be healed. Right. And the only reason that I know all of these things is because I've walked through literally all of them. Like my body isn't doing what I want it to do. It's like, oh man, when I was pregnant and just about to have my kid, she was overdue. And I was like, literally, my body is supposed to be like birthing this kid, right? And it's just not. And then I also ended up with preeclampsia, and that just, I mean, it created so much frustration for me because I was like, look, I've done all of this healing. I've been so good on like my nutrition and all of this stuff for this pregnancy, and to have preeclampsia and then to have the birth that I did, which was very, very opposite of everything that I had planned for. Um, I had to do another deeper layer of healing, um, feeling like my body was constantly going against my wishes and what I was working towards. But as I see so many things as being these opportunities for us, I didn't have pain prior to my pregnancy for endometriosis. I had made a lot of those changes and had healed a lot of that, but prior to. But now being on the flip side also, as I've mentioned multiple times as well, like I still don't have endometriosis symptoms at all. And so in that sense, I actually see quite a bit of that as a gift because it allowed me to heal another layer, right, of something that I hadn't quite realized was there. And something that I was still kind of feeling, right, is that like it still feels like so many things in my life are like going against me, right? No matter how hard I try. And so anyway, I can speak to those because I've been through it. I've had to face them and heal them and shift through them. And so these journeys, they take time. They take time and they take the willingness to show up, every week or every couple of weeks to say, okay, like here's what came up. I'm ready to shift through this one and just chipping away piece by piece by piece. And I think that's really where the big, big, big healing really comes from. And so, look, you're here still. If you're still listening to this, then you probably align with some kind of like health journey of some type. You're dealing with some kind of health symptom. But if you're also here still and you're not really like health isn't really my thing, but maybe you have other areas in your life that have been a really big struggle or challenge. Like I tend to help people who want to heal the physical body. But there are other areas in life where someone similar to me, or I've worked with many people in different areas of their life because they all tend to meld together, right? It's like something that you're facing in the health side of things, you're also probably facing in your relationships and in other areas of your life too. So they're not isolated to usually just like one thing. Um, but those challenges, they all fall under the same things that we talked about here, right? Is like, what is it that is there for you to learn? What is it that your body and your spirit is calling you to learn? And then what are the aligned actions that you need to take from there? And the aligned actions come. They're just natural. They come literally from you. Like it's so interesting. Last thing, and I'll wrap this up, is that, many of my clients will say at the beginning of the appointment, like, I just don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do about this because like I just could go a million different directions and I just feel frozen. Like I don't know what to do at this point. Um, and sometimes you'll even say like I've tried a lot of things as well and I still don't know what to do. And by the end of the appointment, when we've like gone through the processes and they've released the emotions and they've changed or rewired the beliefs or integrated parts or whatever it is that we've done, when that energy lines up again, they'll say, "Oh, I know exactly what I need to do." They'll start hearing those things of like, "Oh, this food doesn't feel good with my body. I'm going to cut that food out for a little bit." Or they'll say like, "Oh, actually what I thought I needed to do, I actually need to do this instead." And that'll be a part of their like tasking for the next week, which as they do that, it reestablishes the current changes that we made so that you keep living into those changes, right? Into that new thing, that new pathway that you created. And then it also sets us up for the next week as far as like, okay, here's what I did, here's what I learned, here are the things that happened, in between, and here's what I'm bringing to this appointment next. It's such a cool process because it's literally self-guided. But I just have a lot of tools and a way to just, sort of guide through, right? It's so fun and it's so cool and it's so unique to each person. So there's in that sense, like there is a lot of hope. There's a lot of things that we, can do. Um, and yeah, that's where I want to end up. So if you find yourself that you're just like so burned out on the process of like trying to control for literally everything, to stay somewhat healthy, I hope that this maybe opened your eyes to the possibilities of what might be out there. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and all of the links to like all of the things that are happening right now and ways that you can work with me will be in the show notes. And you can always reach out to me personally if you are interested in exploring what some of that might look like. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for being here and for listening. And yeah, we'll be back next week with another episode. All right, take care.